Hi, it's me again. Okay, so this video is meant to finish what we were not able to finish in our session, and I wanted to see if maybe this could substitute for maybe that secondary meeting we were going to have possibly on Wednesday. So please let me know once you've viewed this if you think we still need another session on Wednesday or if this was sufficient. So let's go ahead. I'm basically where we left off. Here's a view of my triggers for those of you who want to see that again. This is all of them, and obviously you can pause and play this video as often as you want because it's a video. And here's the beginning, my timeline. I'm going to show that. And this is with everything being shown. Nothing is hidden at this moment as far as on the timeline. So we have our Q.1, we have our two elements there, and we have our video, our hotspot, and then we have the three elements for Q.1. And then let's go to Q.2 at second 13, at 13 seconds, and then we have our three elements there, which are our show text box and our pop-ups. So this is basically where we're at. And let me preview that so that way you know what you should be seeing up until this point. So we're going to go ahead and preview this slide. So we have our introduction. It paused like we wanted it to. So we'll go ahead and click start. And that will start the demo. Alright, so now we see that it has paused and we have our second pop-up, or our first pop-up. It says now that you have entered your keywords, which tab do you think you will use to see image results only? So at this point they'll click show. And then it says if you guessed image tab, you are correct. So once again we programmed it so that the show will hide and that our close button will display. Now the last thing we did do was program this close circle to generate, and if I click it, it will resume the video. You see how it's playing there now. And this will play until the end because we have no more stoppage. So let's go ahead and close that, and that's where we should be as of now. So if you're not there, go ahead and take a look at your triggers. Once again, here are my triggers. And also feel free to shoot me any questions that you have up until this point, or throughout the video, really. Alright, so let's go ahead and do our third cue point. So I'm going to go to this third slide with our content. So here it tells me Q.3 is at 29 seconds. So let's go ahead and set that cue point up. Let's go to 29 seconds. And I passed it. Here we go. Click. Right click once. Left click once. Then we're going to right click. And then we'll create cue point at playhead. Okay, so before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and hide what we've already done, just so that way I can focus on this new content here. So I'm going to hide all the way to the video and the hotspot. So I will always keep the video and hotspot visible. Everything else I'm going to go ahead and hide, so that way I can focus on what I'm doing. I seem to have moved my buttons for some reason, so I'm going to readjust that. Alright, so it looks like we're all good. Everything's still aligned. They're just hidden, as you can see with this show hide. Alright. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a shape. I'm going to create the pop-up that we have here, this one right here, just so that way you can kind of see how that's done. It's really just creating a shape, but I'll go ahead and do that here since I was not able to do that in the in our session. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Insert, Shape, Then I'm going to select a rectangle once again, and I'm just going to draw one out. This is obviously all adjustable, so that way I don't have to worry about, I can fix this at any point. So I'm going to draw this out. I'm going to get my circle, my oval, and I am going to reference the other. So one thing I want to draw your attention to, notice that it generated, since my playhead was here, it actually started my shapes here. So that is something that could happen if your playhead is at 0. It will start your shapes there. It will start your shapes timeline there. But since I had used the right and left click to generate my cue point, my playhead was still here, so it did start my shapes here, which is nice because then now I don't have to really drag them all the way over. I do have to adjust the timeline, but I will do that after I'm done messing with the shapes. Okay, so I'm going to go back to slide 2, and I just want to get the measurements just to kind of get an idea of where I am, to make sure that everything is consistent. So I'm going to go ahead and ungroup this. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to select my group 2, ungroup, so that way I make sure that I am selecting this triangle here. So the measurements are 188 by 336, so I'm going to go ahead and do that here. 188, 336, and there we go. Now let's look at what the size is for the circle. Looks like it's a 60 by 60, so we'll go ahead and change that here. Alright, and now we'll change the fill. So we had a purple, a nice purple color. I think it was a little bit darker than that. There we go. So it's going to be that second purple. Make sure to match it. And then our outline was the darkest purple there. And then the fill for the circle is going to be white. And we're going to go ahead and type the letter X, but in capitalized. And notice how I did type the letter X, but you cannot see it because it is white. So I'm going to change that to the red. This red. I'm going to go ahead and make it bold. I believe I used Arial for that, so go ahead and use Arial Black and make it bigger. There we go. And then we're going to put an outline. So for the text here, this is what the text stats are. Arial Black, 24, bold. And obviously when you're creating this for yourself, you're going to have full control over how big you want it, how bold you want it, all of those elements. Those are completely up to you because you are the designer. But just for the sake of consistency, and if you want to have it exactly the way I have it, I'll let you see that here. Alright, so let's go ahead and put an outline on this. Put a black outline. We're going to make it a little bit thicker just so you can actually see the outline. And we're going to go with a 3-point, I think is what this one had. Let me double check that. And yep, 3-point. And if you notice, there is a shadow on that, so I'm going to go ahead and add that shadow to this element here. And that's going to be in Shape Effects. Go to Shadow, and it was a offset diagonal bottom left shadow. And now it looks the same. So now you have your pop-up. And let's go ahead and add our content. So we're at cue point 3. Like I said, once again, this content will be, this is whatever you and the business ends up deciding on. Go ahead and copy. I'm going to paste. Alright. So one thing you want to make sure, two things. So one, make sure that when you click out of it, your words are not getting covered by this circle here. If they are, adjust it. You can also make the square, this triangle or rectangle, bigger, and it will put out a little bit more space, and it'll adjust the text to prevent it from being covered by the circle. You can also just move the circle, but you want to kind of keep it consistent so that way all your pop-ups look somewhat this, look very similar. So this is your pop-up. So we're going to go ahead and group this. So you can select it. I'm going to go ahead and select it on the timeline. So I'm going to select rectangle 1 and oval 1. And then I'm going to use my Control G to group them. So now it's group 2. So I'm actually going to rename the group itself because that's how I'm going to identify it from here on out. So this is going to be pop-up 2. Okay. So the group is now pop-up 2, and we want to make sure that it's, once you're here, since and you'll see that now there's just one line as opposed to 2 timelines that we're working with here. So once we see what the content is, so now we'll use the tools button to set excuse me, to set more parameters for your search. We'll use the usage rights tool in this example. So look at what we're referencing and look at, so we want to make sure that the pop-up generates somewhere close to what we're referencing. So the tools tab that we're referencing is this right here, so we want to kind of put it here to draw their attention to that button. So one other thing you can do is you can insert another shape to kind of highlight that. So in case it gets lost, because there are a lot of things going on here, you can insert a shape. And let's go ahead and remove that inside. And you'll kind of see what I'm doing once I'm done. We're going to remove that. We're going to use the outline to bring it out. And let's go with like a green. Hopefully that'll pop enough. And we're going to use the weight to really, really bring it out. Okay. So now you do have this rectangle up here. You do not want to group it because the grouping is what's going to have the pause and start functions on them, so you don't want the tools to be a part of that. One thing that I did start doing is I would make anything that was clickable, I would generate it with a dashed outline, and I would keep that theme throughout. If it was not clickable and it was just something that I wanted them to see and just highlight, it would be a solid line. So if that's an element you want to introduce and use, make sure that you create a theme and you stick to it, because if not, the users will get a little confused. So we're going to go ahead and use this green, or even you can even use like a color. So like we noticed we created that show button earlier, and it was in that I want to say Windows blue because it just reminds me of the blue screen of death, and so it's more of that computer blue and so I use that also as another theme to denote if a button should be clicked. Also, usually whatever content is in the button usually gives it away, like our button that says show. So yeah. So now let's go ahead and adjust real quick. Let's adjust these timelines. Once again, let's go all the way to the end of the timeline. Let's select our timelines here. We'll right click, unselect or deselect show until end for rectangle 2. Let's rename rectangle 2 as tool highlight. Oh no. Let's just shorten that. How about that? Just seems too big. So tool light, and then just so that we know what it is and it's not just rectangle like 6 or something. And then we'll remove the show until end for this one as well, for pop-up number 2, which is the group. And then let's use the control button and then select the tool light. Now that you have both of them selected, look for the double arrows, left click, and drag. I'm going to drag it all the way to 29. We're almost about up on it. Alright, so these are a little short, so I'm going to lengthen them out again. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to reselect them and move them so that way this button here, this cue point, is kind of splitting them in the middle, so that way the stoppage happens right in the middle of the display for this pop-up. Alright, so hopefully you have been able to follow me up until now. If not, like I said, feel free to pause and play this. I'm going to go ahead and go into the triggers. So I know I didn't show you all this earlier, but I'll go ahead and show you here. One way to expedite your design is copying and pasting, just like everything. Storyline does allow copy and paste, and it does allow copy and paste for triggers. So we're gonna take this first one here, the pause media video 1 Google demo when timeline reaches cue point 1. We're gonna use this one. And this double sheet over here is going to copy. So it says copy selected trigger. So we're going to copy. And then we're just going to paste it again. And you notice that it will paste it to the bottom. So it will paste it as the last trigger. So it won't paste directly underneath it. It will be at the end of this list. Okay, so notice that it did keep the cue point 1, which we do not want to keep. So we're going to have to double click to open this trigger. Everything is good here except for the cue point. So what we want to do is change that cue point to number 3. Okay, so like I said, the only thing you need to change is the cue point number. Everything else is good. So then we'll go ahead and click OK. And now you have your new trigger for cue point 3. You're going to do the same thing for the pause timeline trigger. You're going to go ahead and copy. Select it first, make sure it's highlighted in blue, select, copy, and then paste with this little paste icon. You can also use the Control C and Control V features, hotkeys, to copy and paste. I'm using these trigger buttons just so that you can see what I am doing in the video. Normally I do just use my hotkeys. So once again, we'll go ahead and change this one to match so that cue point 3 has 2. So we'll go ahead and double click the pause timeline. And once again, everything here is good. So pause timeline on this slide, when timeline reaches cue point 1, we want to change that to 3. Go ahead and click OK. And so now you kind of start seeing this pattern. Pause media, cue point 1, pause timeline, cue point 1, pause media, cue point 2, pause timeline, cue point 1. You want to keep that pattern. Media first, then timeline, because if you switch them up, if you have timeline pause first and media pause first, it can mess with the system. It doesn't always do that, but it can. So it is important that they are in this specific order. So we've got our pauses done. Now let's go ahead and create our resume and play media, or play media and resume timeline triggers. So now this trigger is going to apply to the group. Okay, so we're going to go ahead, since we haven't created something that is attached to a group just yet, we can't really use the copy and paste method, just because I want to show you how it applies to a group element. So let's go ahead and create new trigger, select the pop-up 2 group, You can either do that in the timeline or click it here on the slide. If you're going to use the slide, please make sure that you have this solid line around and only this line, because if you see this, if you see that you've got two, like you have a dashed line, this dashed line means that you've selected an individual element within the group. So for this, in this example, I've selected the rectangle. And so any trigger I add will just be added to the rectangle, will not be added to the group. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and click. Usually you can get the group by just clicking just above one of the shapes, and it will generate that solid line for you. So now I know that I have my group selected, and I can also double check that by looking at my timeline. Pop-up 2 is selected. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. It's selected now, and we're going to create a new trigger. So now we're going to play media, because we want to keep the media and the timeline at in the same places. So we'll do play media first. So play media, which media? The Google demo. When user clicks pop-up 2, which is our group. Okay, so pop-up 2. Everything looked good. If yours looks like this, then you can go ahead and click OK. And now you have pop-up 2 that has a trigger attached to it. So now we're going to create another trigger to resume the timeline. So new trigger. Instead of play media, we're going to have resume timeline. Which timeline do we want to resume? The slide. When user clicks pop-up 2. So go ahead and click OK. And so there you go. This is done. We don't do anything with this highlighted tool marking. This is merely for purposes of bringing that out just a little bit more, because it will disappear because the timeline is short, just like the group is short. It will disappear once the user clicks the X or anywhere on this pop-up. So we don't really have to do anything with it, because we're not, it's just more of a learning or an enhancement kind of thing. So let's go ahead and see how this all looks. I'm going to go ahead and make sure to always show what you're doing. So right now I hid everything by clicking the hide all, show all. I'm going to click it again to make sure that I show everything. And here, this looks a little off to me, so So now let's go ahead and preview it. Alright, so once again we start here. Alright. Alright, we have our first pop-up. Now that you've entered, click show. Cool, it worked. Now let's go ahead and click the X. It'll disappear. We'll keep going. So look at our different options that we have here. And now we have our pause, and our third pause in the video. So now we will use the tools button to set more parameters for your search. We'll use the usage rights tool in this example. So this kind of just sets it up for what's going to happen next. Notice that our little green box shows up and it highlights the tool so that they know what exactly you're talking about. Another thing you could do is maybe put the word tools in green so that it kind of matches the outline, or match the color to the rectangle or to the highlighted box. It just adds another element of theme and helps the user kind of relate the two. So if I click the X, it will close it and it will continue the video. So that's basically where we're at now. I'm going to go ahead and close again. And so you notice how if everything is shown, you start to have all this buildup, right? So that's why I use that technique. I use the show and hide feature in the timeline, so that way I can really just focus on the pop-up that I'm working on, instead of having to sift through like, oh, did I click this one, or oh man, I clicked this element instead of the one I wanted, and it just makes the process a lot longer. So this is essentially a lot of what it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just go through the rest of it. I'm not going to go step by step. I'm just going to kind of go through the process, and I'm going to use a lot of the copy and paste to expedite it, and then you'll kind of be able to see that in action. Because once you've kind of built it, you have this template that you can just use, and it'll make your design time a lot quicker. So I'm going to go ahead and insert the rest of the pop-ups, and then at the end we'll do the resume and continue buttons that we'll build in. So let me just get this. So see what I mean here? It's just, I'm going to go ahead and hide because it's already a hassle. I'm going to keep pop-up 2 available though, because I'm going to copy and paste this one. So notice how I keep clicking on the hotspot, because it's just like the next feature when I'm trying to select the pop-up. What you can do to help prevent that is to lock the hotspot. So when you lock it, and you're going to use it down here in the timeline, there's this little padlock. When I lock it, it will not allow me to click it or edit it. I can't drag it anywhere. If I try to drag it on the timeline, it will not let me manipulate it in any way. You can unlock it by just deselecting the lock function. But I'm going to go ahead and lock my hotspot because I don't want to have to keep clicking on it. Alright. So I'm going to copy, Control C. I'm going to copy this element here, and I'm going to paste it. So now you see that I have 2, and once again it pasted it on the timeline where my playhead was. So now I'm going to go find the content for this. So that was 3, looking for 4. So notice I just used the Control V and it control pasted just the text. So I'm going to go ahead and change this back to black. And I'm going to rename this because it is named the same as the other one. So we're going to go pop-up 3. Alright, so pop-up 3 is the one I want. And so now, since it's already been measured out, I don't have to go and drag it. I don't have to deselect the show until end feature. Everything is already kind of done. It will also, if you see here in your triggers, it will also copy over your triggers. So you already have these, and these don't really need to be manipulated because it is associated to the group itself. You will have to still create your pause timeline, pause media, and you'll have to associate that with the 4th cue point, which is, according to here, at 38 seconds. So I'm going to create a cue point at 38 seconds. And I'm going to drag this item over there. I'm going to go ahead and hide pop-up 2. So I'm only working with one pop-up. I've already inserted the new text. As you can see here. So now all I really have to do is create another pause media, which I'm going to do with copy. I'm going to go paste. I'm going to fix it right away. Everything's good here, but I'm going to just use cue point 4 now. Okay. And now I'm going to select the timeline, the pause timeline, copy that. I'm going to paste that. Once again, double click, change the 1 to a 4, click OK. Everything looks good. We've got our pop-up 3. Make sure everything looks good on there. Play media. When user clicks pop-up 3. Resume the timeline on this slide. When user clicks pop-up 3. Okay. And the reason I put it on the pop-up is because sometimes users will click on the box and not the circle, and so this is just kind of a way to make it so that way they can basically click anywhere on this pop-up and it will continue the video. They won't have to get stuck trying to figure out which one is which, even though in my head, in my eyes, I believe this is pretty obvious, but sometimes, you know, you just have one of those days. So that's that one. Let's go ahead and create the next one. Control C, Control V. Alright. And we're almost to the last one. Copy the content. And I'm going to paste it with source formatting. So now it's changed. I'm going to change the name to pop-up 4. I'm going to hide pop-up 3. Where's my cue point? My cue point is going to be 56. Go all the way out here. One click, right click, create cue point. Now I'm going to find that one. Here we go, pop-up 4, it's the one that's shown still. You can also see that it's been selected here. And I'm going to drag it all the way to 56. Alright. So let's look for pop-up 4. Alright. We have our resume and play already in place. And now let's just create our pause and play. 5. Okay. Copy. Paste. Last one. Change it to 5. Okay. Alright, that one's good to go. Now our last one is the end cue. So that will be at 1 minute and 8 seconds. And this one's going to be a lot like the intro in the sense that we are going to create like an exit environment. So 1 minute and 8 seconds. Is it 8 seconds? Let's see. One minute and 8 seconds will put us at 68. So let's create our cue point at playhead. So yeah, the timeline only generates in seconds, so you kind of have to do a little bit of math. So that's our last cue point that we have set up there. And what you can do in this instance is what I'm going to do, at least, is I'm going to copy our introduction elements, which are our start button, our intro background, our start button, our intro, and the background. You can create a different kind of exit screen if you'd like, but this is the way I would do it, so this is the way I'm going to do it. So I'm going to select these three elements. I'm going to copy them, Control C, and make sure that right here, and then I'm going to paste them. Alright. Let's see, what did they... Let's see where they at. Interesting. Maybe it's because they're not hidden. They're hidden. There we go. Intro and start button are missing. Copy it, paste, and it pastes. When it pastes things, it pastes it to the top. So you have your background, and then we're going to say exit. Exit background, and then exit button. And then just exit. It looks like I copied two backgrounds. Yes. So I'm going to go ahead and delete one. Yep. And I'm going to re-hide these. And I'm going to go ahead and hide pop-up form. I'm going to group these together, select, select, select. Let's see. It seems as though this is selected also, so I'm going to deselect that. So I just want these three selected. I'm going to go ahead and drag them all the way down. There we go. Alright, so you see how the background is on top of everything else? So we're going to bring the background behind it, and we're going to select exit background. We're going to drag it down. And now it's behind it. We will have to readjust everything, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything, so Control, select, select, and then I'm going to go up to the screen and adjust it so that way it covers the screen evenly. Okay. So then we're going to get our last cue point, copy the content, paste it, format the text, make it bold, go 20. Alright, so now we have our start button, which also carries the same, our exit button, notice that it carries the same triggers. So we're going to go ahead and take those triggers off of it because we don't want it to play or resume when we click on it. So we're going to delete this. You can use the trash can here to delete it, or you can just use your delete button, which I'm going to do this time here. And so it takes the triggers off of that completely. We are going to make another button to review if you'd like. So you can hit, I'm just showing the idea that you can have two buttons on there if you'd like. So I'm going to copy this shape here. I'm going to copy exit button. Copy it. Paste. So now we have two. Sorry. So this exit button 1 that means it was the copy. We're gonna change that to review button. And we're gonna take that one out. Okay. Review demo. If you see that it's doing this to you where it's doubling up the text, you can make it just a little bit bigger and it should stretch out the text a little bit more. But if you're gonna do that, you want to make sure to format the squares or the rectangles so they are the same shape. So we've got 55 by 192, so we'll go ahead and make the start button the same. 55 by 192. Enter. There you go. And start will change to next or continue. And we'll swap them because you want right usually is like anything on the right side indicates progression, as opposed to being on the left is like either review or previous. Obviously you want to go ahead and change the filling on them so they don't look identical. Let's see, if we go with the purple to review, we'll go with like a light green to continue. And so let's go ahead and put triggers on these buttons. So in order to review, we can have it go, we'll create a new trigger and we'll have it go to jump to slide, and we'll say previous slide. Although there is no previous slide associated with this, you could jump it to that prep slide that we talked about, so that way they can start the demo from the beginning. And so we'll jump to previous slide when user clicks reverse button or review button. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing for our continue. New trigger, jump to slide, next slide when user clicks exit button. And so now you'll see that it gave it that progression there. And that's basically it. So let's go ahead and preview this. Actually, I did forget to do one thing. I did forget to just adjust our our timelines. So let's go ahead and adjust that. Go to 6. Okay. Double click. 6. Okay. So you can just count it out. You should have 6 cue points. So let's look at that here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Alright? If you are missing one of these, it will obviously not work. So sometimes that's where the issue lies. Also, you notice here these are 2 timelines, as opposed there's 3 timelines, because this one's for Q.5. So one of these needs to be a media. So we're going to go ahead and double click that, and I'm just going to edit this trigger as opposed to just creating a new one. So action is play media, assigned, which is going to be our Google demo, when timeline reaches Q.6. And then we're going to hit OK. So now it should be media, timeline, media, timeline, media, timeline, media, timeline, media, timeline, media, timeline. And we have 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So those are all in order. And we have our exit button and our review buttons in place. We have our start buttons in place. Everything looks to be in place. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that again. And let's take a look at our timeline. So the only things that should be spanning the entire timeline are the rectangular, the hotspot, and the video. Notice that these go all the way, and they have our triangles to denote that they go until the end. So let's preview it, make sure we show all, hide all. You see all of the stuff we've done all lined up. Alright, let's go ahead and preview this slide. Alright, let's see our demo. Alright, want to draw your attention to this. So notice how we didn't really reposition this pop-up and it's blocking what we're referencing. So you're going to want to go back in and readjust this. But we'll let it play out for now. But you will want to bring it you're going to have to bring it below so that way they can see this drop-down menu. Same thing here, although it doesn't really block it too much, we should probably drop this down just a little bit so that all of these boxes can be viewed. Okay. So once again, if we continue, it's going to tell me it's not part of this slide because or not part of the preview because we're only previewing the single slide alone. Same thing here. Then we'll hit close. So let's go ahead and look for let's go ahead and adjust those last two that we noted there for the adjustments on the screen. So we can further specify our results by using the colorful boxes. That was one of them. You can edit it here and just kind of estimate where you think it'll be, but you can also, if you bring this time cursor to where the pop-up is, it should generate a screenshot behind, giving you an idea of what the screen will look like at that point. If you don't want to see everything else behind it, you can hide it once again, so that way you have a better view. Okay, so now we can have a clear view of what it looks like, what that screenshot will look like when it does pause, and we can lift it or we can move it so it's in the middle when it generates, just so that way it is purposeful. So now that we've adjusted that one, I think the one before it was also in an incorrect spot. So we're going to unhide that one, and we'll go ahead and hide pop-up 4, and we'll work with our pop-up 3. Alright, so we'll go ahead and do that. You can also bring the cursor just to make sure in the right area. It does, like I said, take a minute to render, so you do see here where the drop down menu ends, so that you can get a better idea like where you want to put this. We'll just put it right there. I believe everything else was in the right spot. I'll go ahead and hide that. So now we're looking at the tool pop-up. Let's go ahead and click on the number here. Not that, sorry. Drag that back. And then it will render the image. And that's a good placement because you can still see the tools button and the pop-up. So everything else looks like it was good. Let's go ahead and show everything. And this is kind of what it looks like if you show everything. But remember, when you go to publish it, you want to make sure that everything's shown. Even though it looks like this on your screen, it will not look like this once it's published. So that's basically it. That is everything. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm sure there will be lots of questions. But I just wanted to give this to you in case you were feeling anxious or ambitious, so that way you could give it a shot on your own. And maybe we can possibly forego another meeting on this subject. If you want to still have a meeting, by all means, I am totally for it. But other than that, this is it, and let me know if you have any questions. Always make sure to save, so save your stuff always. Other than that, I am signing off. Thanks.